Hello, for this video I want to have a look at buttons. We're on the way to making a menu system, but before I get the menu system I just want to have a look at the buttons itself so then we can incorporate that smoothly into the menu and keep these videos reasonably short. Okay, so let's have a look at this. We've got our code, we've got a game class. We should be fairly familiar with the sprite classes. Now what we're going to do is create a new sprite, and that sprite is going to be our button. Now it's not your traditional sprite in that it's not a character or something, but it does a lot of the things which we need in terms of we can display it on screen and we can get collisions with it fairly easily. There are other ways to do it, but this is what I quite like. Okay, so we need those lines, we also need those. And yeah, when I'm creating one of these I do generally just steal the code from myself. It's the easiest way to make sure that I got the basis that works. Okay, so what I'm looking for is something that will just have the screen like so, and then we can just have a few buttons on the screen and then have some text in there. That's what I'm envisaging. You can have all sorts of ideas, but that would sort of be play, settings, exit, that sort of thing. So that's what I'm shooting for. So we're going to have a button class, and that will be an individual button, and it seems sensible to me in the same way that for the bullet we gave it an X and Y coordinate for it to start. It would be nice just to have this template button which we can give an XY coordinate, and that will be probably the top left of the button would make more sense. Okay, so that is our basis. Now what we would also need to take in is probably some text. So I'll just, you know what, I'll leave that for now. We'll just call it in this. So what do we need for any sprite? We need the image and we need the rectangle. So the image, now instead of getting an image loaded from the file, what we can do is just create a rectangle, create a surface, and then just write on it. You can do it with an image and sort of have an image as the background of the button and then add things. It's entirely up to you. So just like we did for the bullet, I'm creating a surface and I'm going to create it, let's say 300 by 100. So that should be a nice rectangle to that we can then use for the button. And okay, so that's created the image. Now I can draw on that image, and I can draw a light grey, and I can do that over the entire image. And then what I'm going to do is draw a darker, probably a black, over everything but the outside. So if we just get rid of that, if we've got our button like that, what I'm going to do is draw everything in grey. So let's actually do that. There we go. Draw everything in grey, and then I'm going to draw another box inside that and fill that in black. Doesn't help with one's freehand drawn, the other one's accurate, but that's the idea which I'm looking at, just to give it a nice border. It's only going to be a few pixels, that. Okay, so let's have a look. So that's drawing the background on the whole thing. Now we can actually draw the button. And we're putting that on the image, and we're going to use just off black. And so we're just going to give it 10 pixels from the edge. So 10 pixels from the edge would be that. There we go. We can now say the rectangle is self.image.getRect. Before we use from the center, I think top left makes more sense, and we're using the X and Y. Now that kind of shows that we don't really need to be storing this information, because the X and Y aren't going to be changing for a button. We're not moving it along the screen. So that itself should actually work. So now if we go to our game, where we're gonna add this? Well, when we create the ship, why don't we do it in here? The button equals a button, and it's going to be let's say 50 in from the side, 300 down, and that's the text which we want on it. Let's have a quick look at that, add it to the sprites. And we can see what that does. There we go. So we got a button sitting in there. It's not doing anything at the moment, but it's looking reasonable. What would be nice now is to add some text into that. So we've got it drawing. Now, what did we use for text? Ah, yes, we created a font. And just use the default font, and we use the font of 30. And we created a text surface, and that text surface is just the writing, and text is what's coming in from the argument, and we're going to do whatever color. Not that bothered at the moment. Okay, so that's created the text surface. So we've created a surface for the button and a surface for the text. So what we can do is blit one on top of the other. So self.image.blit. So blit is basically just pasting one on the other, and we're going to put the text surface on that, and we're going to offset that. Now it's 100 high, so let's just say 30. No, that's the X. Let's say 50 by 30. See what that looks like. What did I get wrong on that? That should be a like so. There we go. So we've got a button with text on there, and I can just go to the game, copy these two lines, and if I just leave that one, change that one to 150, change that one to say quit. Let's have a look at that. There we go. So yes, we've still got the game going on around it, but we've got some buttons. They don't do anything there. Okay, we can make this a bit snazzy. We got the image. It would be nice to have a mouse over and a normal image. So we've created the text surface once. We don't need to do that again. But we can create another image. Call this one a normal image. You can call it what you want, really. and this one the hover image. And then when we're adding the text, we can use the same text surface and add it on norm image, and we can add it on hover image. So now we've got two different images, and all we need to do is set image to be whichever one is appropriate at the time. It's worth noting we've only done this once on the creation of the button. We're not recreating the images all the time. We're not changing whether we're not recreating the entire button when we hover or move off. So have a quick look at that. It's still the same. If we change this quickly to say hover image, then we'll get the hover effect, which at the moment is exactly the same. So let's just change that. What should it look like when it's hovered? Why don't we just change the color so it's a lot lighter? Let's see what that does. That's not bad for the hover image. Okay, so at the moment we've only got the init. We haven't got an update. So we can add an update, and this update is just going to detect, is the mouse hovering over this area or not. So we can say is self.rect.collide point, and that's a good way just to see, is there a collision with an individual point, and the individual point we're talking about is the mouse position. So get pos will just return the current position of the mouse. And we can just do that for now, and you should see when the mouse goes over, it says collide. Okay, obviously we don't want it to say that. Instead, when it's hovering over, we want the image to be hover. Whoops. Otherwise, if the mouse isn't over this, we want the image to be the normal image. Let's try that, see what that does. Wowza. Ain't that cool. So that's looking quite snazzy. It's not doing anything, but we haven't got the click sorted yet. Okay, so that's created a couple of buttons and it interacts with the mouse, but we haven't got any click. Now we could do a click function in here. However, what would it do? If we have the same button class, we don't want the click to do the same thing. So this is where we have things called callbacks. And a callback is a way of giving a function to another object, in this case in Python. So where we've created the button, we can say actually what we're passing to it is going to be a function of this object. So we can say def play, and all this is going to do at the moment is say play the game. Notice I haven't put the brackets around it. That's because I don't want it to actually run this function. I'm just saying pass this function into that object. There we go. So we've got two functions, and what we're doing is we're grabbing those two functions and passing them into the button. And so obviously we need to capture it, and callback tends to be the term we use. This shouldn't be anything new. So we're just storing it as a callback. Now, when we've actually got a click, so we're only going to get a click when the mouse is over the object, we can say if it's pressed, specifically the left mouse button, then, and we can move that above, then I want to call the self.callback, and we do have the brackets now because we're calling that function. It was just a variable, but we've passed in this variable an entire function. So this function is being stored there. So this is now a function which we can call as we call any other function. And this button class really doesn't care what function that is. So now if we do it, it mouses over and we click on it, it says play the game. We click on that one, it says quit the game. So we've got this button working successfully. It's coming up multiple times because it's saying, yep, the mouse button's pressed, it's still pressed, it's still pressed, and it's doing that loads of times before I release the mouse button in just that fraction of a click. So that is buttons working successfully. So all we've got is the button being created here with the X and Y coordinate, the text, and the function which we're trying to run. We'll do more on what we actually want the function to be in the next video when we look at menus, but at the moment it's just a couple of functions. And then we've created a button class which is a sprite, takes the X, Y coordinates and the text which you want, and a callback function. Saves the callback function, but with the text it just makes a text surface. It creates some buttons, one for the normal state, one for the hover state. You could, if you want, have the size, the XY, as well as the XY passed in, but for now I'm just passing in the X and Y, and if you want to make it more customizable, that's up to you. You could pass in whether you want a small, medium or large button. It's entirely up to you how you do that. And then we're using the XY coordinate to specify the top left of the button, so then we pass that in. So where we've got our screen, we're saying I want a button there and then it will draw it, and I want a button there and then it will draw it. That to me makes more sense for buttons as opposed for when you've got your ship. You may say I want my ship there, and then you're expecting that ship to be drawn centering on that point, and then it can rotate. So it's a slightly different way of looking at it, but I think that works. And it starts with an image. It does start with the hover image. It doesn't really matter because immediately it will say is the mouse over that or not. So this is saying is there a collision with the mouse pointer and this sprite. So self.rect collision point, using this position, is there a collision? If there is, hover. If there's not, the normal image. If there is a collision and the mouse button's pressed, then call back. You can do it various ways, such as looking at the event loop here and saying, hang on, is there mouse press? Is that in the positions where a button would be? However, I think this is a lot more self-contained, although it's probably not as efficient. It's the trade-off between efficiency and readability and manageability. So hopefully that is all manageable and you can start creating your own buttons. On the next video, we'll look how to put them into a menu. Have fun.